Will Vladimir Putin agree to Trump's proposed ceasefire with Ukraine? Hamas refuses to release the 59 remaining hostages or their remains and thus rejects a ceasefire with Israel. The U.S. is bombing the Houthis in Yemen as President Trump promises to hold Iran responsible for the actions of its proxies. And finally, the Democrat Party achieves new levels of unpopularity. Welcome to Inside Israel News, your home for American conservative commentary on international affairs and thorough and unbiased analysis of Israeli news, politics, and current events in the Middle East. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. This is Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Mensch-Kight. Welcome back, Insiders. It is I, your mad genius, your gregarious Vulcan, your prophet of things to come. And I have another exciting episode here for you of Inside Israel News with a little bit of, I don't want to say a sad note, I guess change is a part of life. This is going to be the last episode of Inside Israel News. But don't worry, I'm not going away. I never shut up, so don't worry, you'll get to hear more of me. From now on, the podcast is going to be under a different name. The original intention, as I've told you guys before, I wanted to get Israel Insider News, but there was already a podcast out there called Israel Insider years ago. So I didn't want to, trample on their name. The word news at the end was not enough of a differentiator. So I went with Inside Israel News. But people have gotten the impression somehow that I live in Israel or that kind of thing. Also, back in 2021, when I was doing the podcast, it really was just about Israel. And since then, people asked about European politics, so I got into that. Then the Ukraine war started, and I started broadening the show. As a longtime American conservative commentator, I've been unable to keep my mouth shut about American politics. And then, of course, I added East Asia last year as we headed into World War III by proxy. So basically, this is a geopolitics podcast now in broad and general terms. So, there's an emphasis on Israel still, as you guys know, but it's not really an Israel podcast anymore. So with that, it has been time to change the name, and I've been thinking about names, this kind of thing. It's been interesting brainstorming and working with, checking with my marketing people. And, when I say marketing people, friends of mine who work in marketing, because it's not like I can afford to go out and, I'm just your lovable lawnsman. I don't have $10 million to finance this podcast. If what's the Kamala Harris campaign paid $4 million for a podcast episode. They got 1 million streams, and it was all their own people. Like nobody was interested. They didn't change a single vote with that. I'm sure they could have found a better way to spend $4 million, right? If I had $4 million, this podcast would be first rate. But, it's time to change. And I've wanted to get my name into the podcast. And so, brainstorming different ideas. And one day my dear wife, and, so glad I married her. She's a good deal smarter than I am. So we were chit-chatting, and she said, well, how about Mensch-Kight? And I thought, Mensch-Kight, right? So, Mensch-Kight, a Mensch is a good guy, right? Like, in German, it means a male person, male adult human. But in Hebrew and in Yiddish, so Yiddish is a mix of Hebrew and German. Anyway, a mensch is a good guy, right? He's be a mensch, oh, he's such a mensch. Mensch-Kight is what makes a mensch a good thing, a good guy, right? So, Yossi, he's so loyal, he's got Mensch-Kight. His loyalty is a Mensch-Kight. Well, so that's, Mensch, K-I-T, in German. Well, my last name is Kite. K-I-G-H-T. So, my dear wife, so why not Mensch-Kight? Well, that's good. So it keeps the Jewish character of the podcast right there, but also gets my name into it. And of course, geopolitics is what I do. So The next episode, episode 139, is going to be the first episode of Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, because this podcast has just broadened so much. It's time for a rebrand. I knew it was going to end up coming ever since I grew beyond just Israel, and it's finally here. But I think we've got a good name. So yeah, you could find Mensch-Kight Geopolitics on X already. That's the account I have set up there. So far, I've tested it with a number of people I know, and they like it, right? Well, I've also been checking around. Not everyone knows what a mensch is, has ever heard of Mensch-Kight, but mensch has kind of passed into the vernacular as one of these Yiddish terms that people know. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people will get it. So let me know what you think. Right, you can comment on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can reach out to me, IK at MKG, MK Geopolitics. It's a very easy email address. My name is hard to spell, so IK at mkgeopolitics.com is the new email address, and mkgeopolitics.com is under construction, but it'll be coming soon. So you'll have a new podcast, website, new look, all kinds of things. So it's going to be a little bit different. And of course, you're still going to be my insiders, but you're also going to be mentioned, because if you listen to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, that's Mensch-Kight. You're a mensch. Welcome to the club. So there's going to be a little bit of fun there. I'm going to try to liven it up, bring in a little humor, and of course, bring you the same excellent coverage to which you have become accustomed. I will keep you in the well-informed category of people to which you have become accustomed from the show. So, Mensch-Kight Geopolitics coming soon. So it's a sad thing that this is the last episode I'm doing under the existing title, but it'll still be available in the same places. I'm just changing the name. Wherever you listen, you'll be able to hear it. The name on Spotify, Apple, it's going to say, formerly Inside Israel News for a while, so that people don't get confused. But yeah, it's a change. Change is a good thing. I'm embracing it. It broadens the scope. I talk about a lot of things, and I think that's a positive. Okay, so that's how that's going to go. But anyhow, let me know what you think. And don't be surprised when the next episode comes out and the podcast has a new name. So with that, I guess let's dive into the show. So the Good Intentions newsletter, which is published by Bob Zeidman, and he's written a bunch of great books, Animal Lab, Good Intentions. It's good to read fiction when you can read it from someone who shares your values. I like his stories, and he takes wokeness to the nth degree, to its near logical conclusion, if there is in fact any logic in it. And it's entertaining to read, people learning about the free market, liberty, morality, and that kind of thing. Read books by people that you agree with. That's a good thing. I do a lot of reading of nonfiction. Lately, there's been so much news. So many things are happening. It's been so overwhelming. I know listenership is down. I don't blame people. I mean, there's so much going on out there that if you have the attention span left to listen to the podcast, good for you. And my hardcore people, like the people who keep listening, love you much. You guys have Mensch-Kight. You guys are real mention. Appreciate you very much. And I'm going to start, marketing out there and growing the podcast again under the new brand. Right. Anyway, so Bob Zeidman in his Good Intentions newsletter, which you can sign up for at goodintentions.com, he has a great article. Again, this is another one of Daniel Pomerantz's articles talking about this Mohammed Khalil thing. And, I mean, there's layers here, but let's be real, people, okay? When you come to America, right, we don't want you to come here and hate on America. Like, you don't come to America to say America's a bad place. Right? That's beyond ungrateful. Like, here we have, Ilhan Omar and all these people that they come here and, this guy, Khalil, right? I mean, so, you come here to enjoy the blessings of America, right? This is where liberty lives. There's prosperity, there's opportunity. You here, we don't care where you came from or who you are. You can start out, whatever you're good at, do it. All we care about is what you can do, right? It's a great country for that. A good friend from Lebanon pointed out to me, his whole life in Lebanon was about being a Lebanese Christian. Being Christian in Lebanon was a big deal because it impacted where he could go, what he could do. It created dangers in his life. And then he came to America and he's like, oh my God, nobody cares here. They don't care if you're Lebanese. They don't care if you're Christian or whatever. Like, this is America. Like, you come here, you work, whatever you can do, right? And, he developed a professional career and opened his own business in time and is succeeding. That's the thing. Like, you don't have to be somebody here to be somebody, right? You don't have to have pedigree. But when you come here, like this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, and you spread Hamas propaganda and you spread hate against minorities who live here because he's bloodthirsty anti-Semite, then you've worn out your welcome. You know what I mean? And people go, oh, the free speech, whatever. We keep hearing people on the left saying that hate speech isn't free speech, right? When it's hate speech according to their definition. But if you're over here and you are promoting violence and racism against Jews and promoting mass murder and celebrating terrorism and promoting terrorism, you don't belong here. Goodbye, good riddance, adieu, right? Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Goodbye. Not going to miss that guy. And many, many more need to follow him. He came here and he abused his welcome. He abused the American system to spread bigotry and hate and that kind of nonsense. Obviously Pomerantz focuses a lot on this legal issue because people keep talking about, the legal. If you're here on a green card and you are a permanent resident, you are not a citizen, right? Like, you're not entitled. You don't have the right to live here, right? So if you've abused our system and you're here promoting racism, we're going to kick you out. Goodbye. Like I said, drop kick. We're punting you back to where you came from. And that's an excellent example. And so if you go to the Good Intentions newsletter, he has that article and Pomerantz talks about the legalities of it. And he's pointing out that legally speaking, legal aliens cannot promote terrorism. Like, it's illegal, right? So... one of the options is deportation, right? So check that out. Bill Maher, I usually, tend to give Bill Maher a benefit of the doubt. And, he's often funny, some funny things to say. He's talking about, update on World War III. We're switching sides. And it's funny. It's not true, but it's amusing. You can have a little chuckle. And... maybe it's like it's a Jewish thing. Like, we have a great sense of humor about ourselves. Like, we laugh at ourselves all the time. And I think conservatives can laugh at ourselves. We can have a little chuckle, okay, you could perceive things a certain way and have a chuckle about it. But he was dead wrong on this issue. I'm going to talk about a segment on his show a little later in another topic, but he was saying, if you support free speech, you have to support this guy, Mahmoud Khalil. No, you don't. All right. Freedom of speech has its limits. And the limits are when you do harm to other people. Just like, my freedom to walk down the street and move around and do, interact with people and all that kind of stuff stops at your nose. Like, I can't punch a person legally, right? That's battery. Right? That is a crime. So, if I go around promoting hate against a group of people, that's bad. That could be criminal, especially if I'm inciting violence. You have Jews on campus who are unsafe because of people like Mahmoud Khalil. He's promoting mass murder and genocide overseas. This is not good, okay? It's not legal. And if you're a terrorist promoting terrorism on U.S. soil, you can be sent out. So I just have to disagree with Bill Maher on that. Now, I disagree with him often. I don't necessarily talk about those disagreements here because it's like, I disagree with the woke left and I talk about them all the time. Like, we all know the woke hive mind. But this is one area where he was just dead wrong. This is not a free speech issue. This is a promoting terrorism issue. Okay, we had just real quick, I wanted to mention this. We had this incident early in America's history. This guy, Citizen Genet, came over here from the French Republic and started trying to rile up Americans to support the French Revolution, and was trying to procure warships, from American shipyards, and ammunition and weapons, this kind of thing. It's like, obviously he was deported. But the point is, from the very beginnings of our country, it has not been okay for you to come here and promote a foreign war, promote the interests of a foreign government that is not an ally of the United States, right? You cannot harm U.S. interests. So if Israel is America's ally, you can't promote terrorism against Israel and get away with it. That's not cool. On top of the fact that, he's promoting terrorism, here too. All the anti-Semitism, the bigotry, the racism. So anyway, that's enough on that topic. I just wanted to get my word in because, it's totally inane the way these people, get all fired up about trying to protect terrorists. It tells you a lot about what the woke hive mind is and how it thinks. Okay, so, but America is going to be a better place without that guy. So, with that, I will move on to one of the two main topics that we have, going on, Ukraine, Russia, and then I'll talk about Israel and Middle East issues, and that kind of thing here. But on a lighter note, right? Check this out, right? So Ukraine and Russia might get a 30-day timeout. That's what this ceasefire is like. You know what I mean? It's just a timeout. We're just going to call a timeout on this thing. It's like a geopolitical nap, right? Putin's probably just mad. He can't binge watch The Art of War on Netflix without Zelensky interrupting him, right? U.S. is like, well, here's some aid, but only if you promise to share the popcorn, right? Peace talks or a snack break. You decide, right? I look at this stuff, and it sometimes it's silly how international politics can be just like, we're gonna share some popcorn and watch the fireworks. It gets ridiculous. The idea of ending the war is not a bad idea. Okay, I hear it. One of my longtime conservative pals, Jake Jacobs, got into a debate with him. He had a podcast here years ago, and he didn't continue with it. But he's on X. You can find him out there. Got into an argument with me saying that I'm supporting war and people dying. He was like, no, what I think, what he thinks, what we want doesn't really matter here. All right. We didn't start the war, right? Like, I would never have started this war if I'd had the option to. Like, I would never have advocated for Ukraine attacking Russia, right? Or any European power or the United States, anyone. I would not have started a war, right? If I magically controlled geopolitics, if we really could control, I guess you could say I got outvoted at the Elders of Zion, right? Because we control everything. So, we pulled a string and started a war for some reason that no one can fathom. But just what the heck? The world's been at peace too long. We just decided to start a war in Europe. Anyway, so Putin started this war, and only he can end it. I mean, that's the reality of aggression. That's what it means to be an aggressor, right? So imagine this for a minute. You're in high school, and your friend's being bullied, right? And you're trying to give your friend moral support, right? The bullying only stops when the bully decides to stop bullying. Now, if the person being bullied stands up to the bully and makes them stop, that's one way to do things. But, sometimes, you're too small, too weak, you can't really do that. So, maybe you go and intervene on your friend's behalf to stop the bullying. But again, ultimately, the bully only the bully can decide when the bullying stops. Putin started this war, and he has no interest in ending it. We know that now because he's rejected the ceasefire. And this is the part where the whole thing gets silly. We wanted Ukraine to be willing to sign the mineral deal and to be willing to go with the 30-day ceasefire, the geopolitical nap, right? So, we can they can share the popcorn and we can watch the fireworks. Well, after all that, finally, U.S. Representatives sat down with Ukraine and Saudi Arabia. They had a great meeting. They finally agreed to the mineral deal, finally agreed to the ceasefire talks. And Witkoff took that deal to Russia, and then the Russians are like, no. And by the way, we don't want to see Witkoff again. So they want to talk, Putin wants to talk to Trump. So they talked for, hours and hours on the phone. And what was the result? Putin said that he'd agree to stop attacking energy infrastructure in Ukraine if Ukraine would agree to stop long-range attacks in Russia. That's not a ceasefire, folks. That's not a deal. That's not even close to a deal. It's not even headed toward a deal. Now, an hour later, Russia bombed energy infrastructure in Ukraine. So nothing has changed, right? It's beginning to look like Putin's taking Trump for a ride. I don't see how Trump does not see how he's being insulted here, right? Putin said no, he laughed in his face, and he made this ridiculous offer about, energy infrastructure and long-range attacks. It's nonsense. How do you fight a war that way, right? Meanwhile, with the lack of, the break in intelligence sharing, Russia was able to gain the upper hand for a brief time, attacking Ukrainian targets. Then they moved their forces around to try to get the Ukrainians out of the Kursk salient, right, out of the parts of Russia that are occupied by Ukraine. So now Putin's delaying so that he can get an upper hand in the war, right? Trump's playing into that and helping him delay. And I mean, Russia's getting lots of help here, but we still don't have a ceasefire. The Russian demands of Ukraine are the same ones they had at the beginning of the war. They want to be able to limit the size of the Ukrainian military. They want Zelensky out of power. They want, Ukraine. They want Ukraine to surrender. Same thing they've wanted from the very beginning. Putin wants to conquer Ukraine. What a funny thing. Who knew? I knew. I said he was going to attack Ukraine as soon as Yanukovych left back in 2014. Like, it literally posted that on Facebook one day, and the next day there were, little green men, as we say, men in unmarked uniforms in the Crimea, right? Going around taking over the airport and taking over taking control of the area. And Russia seized part of Ukraine and then moved into Luhansk and Donetsk. So if Putin isn't willing to end the war, we could just say, hey, we tried, but Putin isn't interested in peace. That's pretty obvious at this point. Why are we still playing this game? Why are we still living in a delusion where a peace settlement is possible? If we really want there to be a pause in the fighting and peace, this is the time to say, okay, you know what? Putin backed out of the ceasefire. It didn't work. So we're going to send more arms to Ukraine. We're going to send them more bombs. We're going to send them more ammunition. We're going to give them the weapons they need to defeat the Russians. That would show strength. Right now, it kind of looks like Putin's pulling Trump's leg, and Trump is good with it. I said before, and I really hope Trump has a larger plan here to deal with this. I really hope he can drive a good deal. Trump has had his ups and downs in international affairs, but where people are willing to make a deal, he's willing to sit down and talk about it. He sat down with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un wasn't willing to make a deal. He wanted unilateral withdrawal of U.S. forces from Korea. Yeah, not going to happen. Sorry, buddy, we're not going to hand you South Korea. Right? That's not part of the deal here. The deal is you demilitarize, you reduce your forces, and we'll take the tensions down a notch. Okay? But no, you don't get handed South Korea on a silver platter. It doesn't work that way. Yet now, here we are at this point in the deal. We bullied Ukraine terribly to get them into a position where, we have this mineral deal where we have an interest in Ukraine, where Ukraine's willing to sign a 30-day ceasefire, take a geopolitical nap, right? And Russia's not. So where are we here, right? This is not working. We'll see. Like I said, I hope Trump has something up his sleeve. I hope he has a plan here that's going to work out better, because so far this doesn't look good, my friends. It just doesn't. Meanwhile, the woke right is all, Ukraine's the worst country in the world. And as I told you in the last episode, I mean, it's ridiculous for people on the woke right to be going out there and talking about Ukraine like it's the worst country in the world, because, even if Zelensky was a dictator, Stalin and Mao have been allies of the United States at different times, right? No matter how bad Ukraine is, they're nowhere near as bad as our allies. Oh, but he's closed churches and shut down newspapers and arrested journalists. So did Abraham Lincoln. So there really isn't anything about Ukraine that's especially nefarious or wicked or whatever. And all this stuff about Zelensky, and he's rude and he doesn't wear a suit and this kind of thing. He's Eastern European. I mean, I know a lot of Slavic people. I have a lot of really good friends from Yugoslavia, from, who are Russians and Ukrainians. They're interesting people. Politeness is something they acquire when they come over here, but they're very direct. People in Eastern Europe, they don't dabble in the niceties like the French do or the Germans. They're not the politeness and the conversation, whatever. They're very direct. They just when they think something, they just say it, right? But I just telling you, I can't help when people are attacking Zelensky. All I hear is whatever their complaint is. All I hear is that damn Jew. Because all of this stuff, he's just in it for the money. Well, of course he is. He's a Yid, right? I mean, Jews are sniveling, conniving trolls with horns on their heads that, eat blood matzah and have secret space lasers. So, of course, the Elders of Zion started this whole war so that, Zelensky could make $1 billion, or could become a billionaire, which he isn't. Anyway. As I talked about last, most of the aid to Ukraine is old equipment that we sent over there, right? It's just a valuation of equipment. The cost of dismantling that equipment was a cost that we would have had to pay. Disposing of it would have cost money, right? Instead, we shipped it to Ukraine. The shipping was, transporting it was cheaper than disposing of it. So they actually saved us money in that sense. And, $100 billion worth of old equipment and sending them Javelin missiles. The money that we're spending on Ukraine aid then is to buy more Javelin missiles for us, right? So if we send them 1,000, we buy 1,000 more for our troops so that they have them when they need them, right? Anyway, so all of these arguments are ridiculous. Like I said, I really miss the Reagan-esque moral foreign policy, the evil empire and all that. Back then we knew who the bad guys were and who the good guys were, and we were willing to say it. Now the woke right is out there destroying morality. That's why they were attacking Winston Churchill, and now you have Tucker Carlson out there defending Iran. More on that in a moment. So anyway, so where do things stand right now? Ukraine has launched several offensives in Ukraine and has started gaining back territory. So the Russians are not gaining territory in Ukraine anymore. The Ukrainians are pushing them back. What's more, as the Russians have pushed back the salient in Kursk, the next oblast over, the one near Kharkiv, Ukraine has invaded Belgorod Oblast. So they're attacking there again. So as the Russians are trying to get rid of one front, another front is opening, and, this is starting to look pretty bad for Russia. It's just demonstrating how weak Russia is right now. They're so close to defeat, and I'm not a warmonger. I don't support war. I'm a peacenik, okay? Good old-fashioned 90s liberal. When I was a kid, I didn't even want the U.S. bombing Serbia. I opposed the Iraq War. All right, this isn't a U.S. war. This isn't a forever war. This is good guys fighting bad guys. The Ukrainians don't want to be oppressed by Russia, and we don't even have to fight. Like, the Ukrainians want to do the fighting. Peace is a wonderful thing, and it is not good that people are dying, but why they are dying is important. The Ukrainians don't want to be oppressed. They don't want to be controlled by Russia. That's why they're fighting. And we could just help them a little bit more. They defeat Russia, then Russia will never be a problem again, right? Their economy is weak. The Russians are in decline, right? One of America's greatest enemies, gone, right? Since 1918, Russia, in one form or iteration or another, has been the greatest threat to the United States, right? With the exception of, late May 1940 to early May 1945, when Germany, Nazi Germany was the greatest threat to the U.S. But Russia's been our number one threat since then. In brief time in the 90s, they weren't such a threat, but their nuclear arsenal has still been a great threat, which nuclear arsenal is, desperately in need of repair and upkeep. It's not in good shape. Like I said, it was not even clear how many of their missiles would fly. We don't want to find out, but still. So let's focus on the good guys winning, right? If there's going to be a ceasefire, then the fighting needs to stop. And as soon as it stops, Britain and France are already planning their peacekeeping forces. Britain, France, Portugal, Spain, a number of other countries are ready to contribute forces. Europe can put 30,000 troops down in Ukraine to enforce the ceasefire. Now, I think if they do this 30-day ceasefire, the European troops should move in right away. France and Britain are already working on a Sky Shield plan to provide air cover for Western Ukraine so that while the Ukrainian Air Force is building itself up, they'll have the western part of Ukraine covered, by French and British fighters. Good deal, right? And they're calling it a Sky Shield because, no-fly zones are like where you're creating a zone over enemy-occupied territory, or you're preventing a hostile power from using air power in an occupied territory. So it's not quite the same thing. So I'm glad they're calling it a Sky Shield. It's a little bit different. Anyway, they need to get on that, and Europe needs to grow a backbone. They need to start. They're upping their defense spending. They're getting prepared. Emmanuel Macron gave a speech. He called Russia the enemy. He noted that he said it out loud. Russia is their enemy, and that they need to stand up and prepare to defend themselves. So if the war comes to an end on favorable terms for Ukraine, or Ukraine wins, ultimately, Europe is stronger and they increase their defense budgets, then we've got the Russia front of World War III by proxy covered, right? The Europeans can handle the Russians. The Russians are more of a threat to Europe now than they are to us. Nuclear arsenal aside, and like I said, that's kind of rusting away. Then there we are, right? That's one front done. And Europe would be in a better position to help maintain order in the Middle East as well. That's another topic here in a minute. So we could put this thing into a situation that I've talked about for years where we can focus all of our energy in the Pacific and keeping China at bay. So anyway, that's where that is. And move on to the Middle East now, and then go from there. So when it comes to the situation in Lebanon and everything that's been going on in the Middle East, I mean, you just look at the brilliant operations Israel has conducted in Lebanon, and the defeat of Hezbollah, right? I mean, they took out Hezbollah's top brass faster than you can say kaboom. Now Iran's sitting there like a kid who just lost his best toy in the sandbox fight. Do they throw a tantrum or just build a shoddier one in Syria? My God. Meanwhile, Lebanon's like, can we get a quiet weekend for once? I mean, Lebanon is in terrible shape right now. Hezbollah took a beating from Israel. They were so weak they couldn't help Assad stay in power. Neither could the Russians, for that matter. Although, again, that was mostly Turkey working with HTS to bring down the Syrian regime. But Hezbollah in this weakened state, they're still under Israel's thumb. But HTS and these Sunni groups in Syria still don't like Hezbollah. So they've actually gotten into it in eastern Lebanon along the border. These HTS guys have been fighting Hezbollah. So like Lebanon, finally things calmed down a little bit. Things were sort of calm. Israel's still bombing Hezbollah here and there. They were trying to hide some weapons up north. Israel bombed it. This kind of stuff. Well, now they're fighting HTS. Wow. Lebanon can't catch a break. Can they have a quiet weekend for once? Probably not. This is just this thing. But the pager attack and all of this kind of thing. This was just great stuff. There's this great image out there. Bibi Netanyahu sitting down with John Fetterman. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, the one half decent Democrat left in the Senate, and he gave Fetterman a silver pager, as a memento. And that's just an awesome thing. I mean, what an operation that was. But I was, concerned, Hezbollah is much more of a paramilitary force than Hamas. I was explaining that it was going to be a much more serious operation up north, and Israel just whacked Hezbollah so fast. Heads are still spinning. Like, wow, holy mackerel! How did that happen? So, still hoping the Lebanese army will get its act together and assert sovereignty over the country. With HTS moving in from Syria, it might be a good idea for the Lebanese to start defending themselves and start defending Lebanon from foreign attack. Dismantle Hezbollah and create a peaceful situation in Lebanon. Then Israel could withdraw its troops. I mean, what a wonderful thing that would be. Anyway, as I said, after October 7th, Israel deserves to live in peace after the horrors of 10/7. And, when in Lebanon, things are finally headed in the right direction. As regards Syria, obviously Syria is a big mess. So HTS is, they've been out slaughtering Alawites. These horrible pictures of them capturing Christians and Druze and killing them in the outskirts of Damascus. The Druze have formed a Druze national army, working closely with the Israelis, and basically that southern corner of Syria now is Druze territory with Israeli protection. And there's talk of establishing a corridor along the border over to the SDF forces. The Syrian Democratic Forces are, the Kurds in the northeast of the country. And that would help provide security for Lebanon, for Jordan in that direction. Anyway, it would provide security along the Jordanian border and allow the Druze and the Kurds to work together more closely, and for Israel to help out SDF when it needs it. And as these massacres are happening, the first thought that came to my mind is, thank God Israel destroyed the Syrian military's assets. I mean, the missiles, the chemical weapons, the fighter jets. I mean, could you imagine if HTS had weapons like that and they're out slaughtering people? I mean, anyway, these militant Islam, this cancerous ideology, it's so destructive. Here, Jolani was out talking about how he wanted to create a utopian Syria where it would all be better and minorities would be protected and, all this kind of thing. And no, that's not what's happening. Once an Al-Qaeda terrorist, always an Al-Qaeda terrorist. And like I said earlier, given the benefit of the doubt, wait and see, but we're not going to see anything good. Here we are. Funny how I say these things and they tend to come true. So, Syria is an absolute mess, but we'll see what happens there. These countries are falling apart. Sykes-Picot has proven a total failure a century on. It's just a disaster. So I feel for the minorities in Syria. They're fortunate to have Israel to protect them and look after them. The Alawites are kind of out on their own, and they live along the coast, north of Lebanon, in a kind of a strip along the coast there up to the Turkish border. It's tough times for them. They're going to have to figure out how to protect themselves, and after Assad and the Alawites ruled the country for so many decades, that brutality hasn't been forgotten. I mean, the regime was tough and it was cruel, and people remember that. So, will Syria ever recover and become a country again? Who knows? Not with this lot in charge, I'm sure. So, Syria's all broken up now, and we should not expect it to come back together. Now there's the issue with Hamas. So Israel has been very patient and negotiated with Hamas and tried to get the release of the remaining 59 hostages or bodies. We saw the spectacle of them having, children out yelling, screaming, and cheering as the bodies of the Bibas family were returned. The shenanigans of sending, a body that wasn't Shiri, the mother, Shiri Bibas. All this kind of nonsense, all the showmanship of their, having all their people out in their little, Hamas uniforms. Of course, as soon as the fighting starts, those uniforms come off, and they're all civilians again, right? When guys die, they're civilians now. They just happen to have their hands in positions that look like they were holding guns before the cameras turned on, and the guns were snatched away at the last minute. Oy. Hamas had every opportunity, right? I mean, U.S. representative there met with them in person, went around the Israelis. That was not a good thing, so he's been relieved. That I was not cool with that at all. Israel is our ally. All negotiations should have the Israelis at the table. And there were no results. I mean, if Hamas releases the hostages, then there can be a ceasefire. But they refuse to do that. So Israeli forces are going back in. They're pounding the Gaza Strip. As I speak, I'm seeing more, reports of bombing in Gaza. And we've had several Hamas leaders taken out. And, it's a good thing. Hamas delenda est. We cannot leave Hamas in charge of the Gaza Strip. They have to be destroyed. And that's difficult because the Palestinian people are Hamas, right? They supported them, as I've talked about before. I mean, in Nazi Germany, Germans risked their lives to hide Jews, right? In Gaza, no one helped the hostages. Not one person tried to help a hostage escape. Not one person, cared for the hostages or tried to release them or hide them or protect them in any way, shape, or form. And they celebrate when, babies are choked to death in dark tunnels under Gaza. Barbarians. So this needs to end. Israel needs to finish the job. And Bibi is finally going in there. He sent the forces in there. They're cutting Gaza in two again, cutting the north off from the south. They're going to have to flood and blow up more tunnels and do stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But they need to keep the pressure on Hamas. Absolutely. Hamas has to be destroyed. And of course, Israel's been conducting a lot of operations in Jenin and other places in Judea and Samaria, what the international community erroneously calls the West Bank. West Bank of what? Nobody knows. But, it's been called Judea and Samaria for a long time. So the big thing on this, though, is the headlines. So I'm going to end this topic with this, just the inane headlines. Come on, people. I mean, show me you're a truly unbiased journalist, right? All these headlines out there, Bibi rejects ceasefire. Bibi attacks Hamas. Hamas rejected the ceasefire. Hamas refused to release the remaining hostages. There were all these negotiations. They had every opportunity. Hamas wants this war. I mean, obviously, if they didn't, they'd have given up the hostages or returned the remains of the hostages. That just... the bias in the reporting is so ridiculous out there. I don't, All right. So, on to the Houthis. Speaking of Iranian proxies. So we get all this fun stuff with the Houthis. So, they control the part of Yemen north of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and they've been shooting into the Red Sea, shooting at ships out there. This is nothing new. They're really trying to strangle shipping off there. And that's why, Trump's working on this new shipping route to go from India to Dubai and then by rail from there to Haifa in Israel, right, via Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and then from Haifa out. That would be a really great trade route. Good deal for Israel, good deal for all of the countries involved. There'd be extra revenue, jobs, and opportunities for them in this trade route. And it would bring those goods and services, those goods and containers and what have you, right to the Mediterranean, right? But in the meantime, we really do need the shipping lanes open. So the U.S. has been bombing the Houthis. And this is really, here's a really great thing from Donald Trump. He's been talking about how when the Houthis attack, we're going to hold the Iranians responsible. What a strange concept. The missiles are made in Iran. The organization comes from Iran. The intelligence comes from Iran. Like, the Iranians are doing all of this, and they're just calling it the Houthis. Maybe even the Houthis press a button to launch the missiles. I don't know. Point is, we know who's behind this. And it's time we stop playing this game where Iran does this stuff through its proxies. It's Hezbollah. It's not Iran. It's Hamas. It's the Houthis. No, it's Iran. We know where this comes from. We know the return address. Let's go use it. Okay? U.S. Navy planes and Air Force planes have been flying off the coast of Iran in a very close proximity in international waters still, but, clearly scanning, checking for targets, maybe. Right? The U.S. has sent B-52s to the region. We have word that President Trump has ordered more aircraft carriers and a large contingent of Marines to the Middle East. Right? He's putting Iran under thumb. And that's a very important thing because in World War III by proxy, Iran is the weakest party. We could knock them out first. Right? If we can knock out Iran and Russia, then, the Axis powers are pretty much done. Right? So this is where we need to be. And it's good to see finally someone holding Iran responsible for this nonsense. Now, Saudi media had reported that the Zagros, the Iranian spy ship in the region, was sunk by the U.S. So that they could no longer spot ships for the Houthis. I have not seen confirmation of that, but that's out there. I'm just telling you it's a report. Caveat, we're hearing that. If true, awesome. I mean, the idea that the Iranians can use that ship to spot targets, and help the Houthis attack U.S. ships, right? So after recent bombing, the Houthis launched a bunch of their drones and missiles at the United States Navy. First of all, don't touch our boats. You want to see how that goes? Ask Japan. That's the big one. All those great YouTube videos and TikTok videos, right? America, don't touch our boats. You touched our boats. So this is great stuff. But again, for God's sake, this has got to stop. Interesting note: one fighter plane shot down 11 drones that night. So we have a new fighter ace. Granted, he's an ace shooting down drones and missiles and not enemy fighters, but still, I mean, that's commendable. 11, that's a lot, right? We've been hearing about Ukrainian pilots who shoot down a lot of drones and stuff, and finally American pilots are getting in on it. Very good training, because this is the kind of warfare we're going to be fighting in the future, where we're going to be seeing swarms of inexpensive drones and missiles flying at very expensive and heavily manned warships, and we can't afford to lose any, right? Obviously, there were no hits on the U.S. fleet, but they wasted a lot of ammunition on us. So that's that. But defeating the Houthis, holding Iran responsible, very commendable, very good thing. Finally, we're on the right track in the sandbox in the Middle East. And our Arab allies are able to work with us better now. They didn't get on well with the Biden administration, and the Biden administration would talk a good talk about Israel and then stab Israel in the back constantly. So at least for the most part, the administration has been doing the right things in the Middle East. So with that, I'm going to talk about where the Trump foreign policy is in his first 50 days, right? So we're 50 days into this administration, and how are things? Some pros and some cons, right? So I'm going to start with the cons because I just have to get that out of the way. The Trump negotiations with Putin look ridiculous. They make us look weak. They make us look bad. I know Trump's working on this ceasefire thing, and he's got this, and if it works, that'd be great, if it were possible. I don't think it is. I suppose it's worth a try. I'm glad it's being given a try. The fact that we had to bully our friends into being willing to accept it, our ally in Ukraine, that's not good. I want to use a word like despicable, but I mean, that I do not appreciate it. I don't care what the ends are. That means is absolutely inappropriate and morally bankrupt. It is immoral, in my opinion. The resource deal, I don't understand what the goal here is. They're going to repay us money we never sent them, right? I mean, again, the $175 billion in aid, and Trump keeps saying 350. I don't know where he's getting this number from. The $175 billion in aid we sent was old equipment, most of it. And apparently half of that the Biden administration never sent. right? So I'm looking forward to finding out where the Biden administration sent that money. Was that money laundered or whatever? The aid that's been sent to Ukraine, the Ukrainians are using to fight a war. Right? They used all that equipment. They used all of the ammunition we sent them. So they're trying to do the right thing. Of course, we got woke right out here trying to accuse Ukraine of all kinds of things. Anyway, it does create a U.S. interest in Ukraine. I understand that from a transactional point of view. That's very Donald Trump. I don't like the means. I really don't appreciate the attack on our friends. The big issue in the first 50 days is that we have, excuse my French, but we have pissed off all of our friends, right? Like if I went down to my cigar club and found something to, just went and complained at all the guys and picked something I didn't like, or, I want more of this, or, give me this, give me that, and just ticked everybody off. I wouldn't be having much fun down there, would I? Right? If I pissed off all the guys, right, I would wear out my welcome very quickly. I realize Trump has strategy behind this, that he's trying to get the Europeans to step up, and that there are some goals here. I don't like it. I don't have to like it. I'm just telling you, I don't like it. I wouldn't do it this way. But the reverse psychology on Europe, of course, for years we've been trying to get them to increase their defense budgets. Well, now they're doing it. But at the same time, a lot of countries are worried about whether they can rely on the U.S. as an ally. Are we a reliable ally? And that means countries like Japan, Poland, Germany, starting to think about, should they have nuclear weapons? Right? We've been trying to prevent nuclear proliferation. France is talking about trying to extend their nuclear shield around Germany, maybe Poland too. Poland is asking for the U.S. to put nukes in Poland so that, we have a deterrent against Russia attacking Poland. That's very important now, because if we let Russia keep part of Ukraine, they're going to want to, they want the Baltic states next, and then they're coming for Poland. I mean, Putin doesn't think he has a choice. Like in his vision, he has to take all this territory, right? Okay. China had a fleet off the coast of Australia intimidating the Australians, talking about how they could cut Australia off from Tasmania and this kind of thing. It was ridiculous, but still, the Chinese are still intimidating the Philippines and the Vietnamese, and they have planes flying all around Taiwan. They're building these new bridge ships that they can get, up on the coast and take their troops across the mudflats onto solid ground in Taiwan. They're very clearly preparing for war. None of that's deterred. So we're ready to surrender. We're beating up our friends on behalf of our enemies, and we're letting the Chinese intimidate everyone in the Pacific, and we have no answer. That's the cons. To me, this looks very bad. This is very dangerous. This is showing weakness. What do I always keep saying, right? Weakness begets war. Strength begets peace. Now, for that looking bad, let's talk about the good. Holding Iran responsible for the Houthis. Excellent. Trump's policies on Hezbollah, Hamas, helping Israel. That's been great. We have moral clarity on the issue now. These are our friends. Those are our enemies. We're willing to talk and negotiate if they'll release the hostages, but otherwise, go get them. And actually, Trump's been more hawkish than Israel on going after Hamas. Go get them. So that's very good. We've got the Europeans to start spending money on their defense and thinking about, defending themselves. They had a conference about how to help Ukraine. They did not invite the U.S. They don't need us. That's the thing. Like, these countries can spend more on their defense. Merz in Germany, I wish I had more time to talk about this, and I'll come back to it, but they are amending the basic law, right? So Germany doesn't really have a constitution as we imagine it, but with a 2/3 vote of each house, the Bundestag and the Bundesrat, they can amend the basic law, and they're changing the way that the debt is dealt with, because they have the basic law has rules about how much debt Germany can take on. They're changing that so that they can invest a bunch of money in infrastructure and defense, right? And they're going to have to borrow it, and they're going to keep it kind of like a separate program, borrow it and pay it down rather than attaching it to their typical national debt. But they had to make that amendment. But they had to do that before the next Bundestag comes into office and they negotiate the next government, the next coalition, because in that version of the Bundestag, AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, the pro-Russian party, has enough seats that they and the far-left parties could block this measure, right? It was also unclear, like in the Bundesrat, they're like senators from the U.S. in the old days. They're elected by the Bundesländer, the states in Germany. So there are parties there that aren't in the Bundestag, like there's Bavarian party that's kind of more conservative party, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't clear they were going to be able to get the votes in both houses, but they did. And so now Germany is rearming and is going to prepare for its own defense, and they're working more closely with the French. Beautiful thing, as you know, we have such political division here, and things are so polarized. But I just have to take a note that Olaf Scholz and Merz have been traveling together to international conferences and such, because Merz is the incoming Bundeskanzler and Scholz is the outgoing, right? And this is just beautiful. Whereas things are very intense here, and you know the Democrats won't work with us and this kind of thing. They have a little bit more collegiality. They're working together, so that's going well. So and Trump is kind of reorienting us toward the Pacific. That's a good thing too. So 50 days in, there's some good, there's some bad, but I'm willing to say things are headed in a better direction than they were in the Biden administration, certainly in the Pacific and Middle East. Not fond of the way he's approached the Ukraine issue, but we'll see. I will wait and I will see. I have faith, little faith. Maybe the man has a plan. Maybe things will go better. I just don't like that, we're letting Putin get away with murder and, trying to get this ceasefire. And anyway, so 50 days in, that's where we are. A lot of good, some not so good. We'll see where it goes. And when I get 100 days into the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, we'll see where we are there. Real quick, I'm going to talk about tariffs here before moving on to the break and some lighter political topics. The tariff war. So a lot of people don't understand where the tariff thing comes from. So take a step back for just a second. Trump is rearranging the Republican coalition, right? He's brought working people, unions, right? We have shifting demographics in the Republican Party now. And while tariffs are not necessarily popular with a lot of people, especially people, free traders, that kind of thing, I'm not so much a free trader myself. I like balance, but generally, trade, I've been with that crowd that says trade is good on the whole, on the balance, but it's not always good for our workers. And it's not good when, the only semiconductor company in the world that makes the chips that run AI and our missiles and our cars and all that is in Taiwan, 69 miles off the coast of China. So when we renegotiate our trade relationships, when Trump talks about these tariffs, it does a lot of good for his new coalition, for the economy, and for the future, for our security. And we need to see that, because all this that gets completely lost in the tariff debate. People are like, oh, he's threatening tariffs. Blah, 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 blah. There's a bigger issue here. First of all, the talk of tariffs with Canada, the United Auto Workers sent a letter thanking Donald Trump for his tariffs on Canada, on Canadian vehicles. Wow. I mean, those were the United Auto Workers. I mean, my grandfather was UAW, lifetime member. He made cars, right? To have the, and late in the, he's like, oh, they're terrible, they're politics. But, they have, they made a public statement. They sent a letter of thanks to Donald Trump. I mean, that is huge. So Trump is definitely playing to that part of his base. Now, he's just playing to his base, I think. Yeah, and Biden didn't. All this trans bathroom nonsense. I mean, it's the same thing. That's politics. That's how you do things. You placate your base, right? You give them the things that they want. Now, ultimately, probably not going to have a lot of these tariffs continue for the long term, but it certainly helps our workers here. And we have talk, Taiwan Semiconductor, $100 billion. They're going to build plants here in the U.S. They have the technology. They have the patents. They can build these chips. They have the equipment. Build them here. American jobs, American tax revenue, right? And factories making high-quality chips, the top-level AI chips and cell phone chips and all that kind of stuff, cruise missiles, a long way from China, where if we had a conflict, we'd be able to access these things. Medicines made in the U.S., right? Apple, a whole bunch of these companies, big investments, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars in jobs in America. That's long-term prosperity for Americans. And as I said before, reciprocal tariffs are a beautiful thing. They are a pathway to free trade, right? If Korea charges a 25% tariff on American goods coming into Korea, right? And we charge a 25% tariff on South Korean goods coming into the U.S., it incentivizes them to lower their tariffs, lower the trade barriers, to encourage us to lower the tariff as well, right? That's how you do that, okay? So I don't see that. And Europe, a lot of these places, they have been taking advantage of our trade policies for some time to their benefit. Well, now it's time to trade more fairly and stop screwing American workers. So that's how that's going to work. I'm not so keen on this idea of the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but there are a couple of things that you need to think about there. First of all, the first threat of tariffs led to Trump demanding that Sheinbaum and Trudeau secure, fight fentanyl, fight the trafficking in drugs and this kind of thing. And that's helped. So many of our young people are dying of this fentanyl crap. I mean, we've got to do something. There's a huge, huge benefit from the Trump administration already. And we're going to have to reach, with Mexico in particular, we have to deal with the immigration situation, first safe harbor rule and that kind of thing. And like I've said, northern Mexico needs the workers. So actually a lot of these illegals that are leaving the U.S. and some of them are self-deporting, we're deporting people. In terms of people migrating, if they want to come and work somewhere, northern Mexico is already integrated in the U.S. economy. Come up there and work. They're desperate for workers. That's a great place for them to go. And then we can figure out a way to allow people to come here legally, right? People, especially with families, skills, I don't have a problem with that. If we have more jobs than we can fill, and we do now, then I think there's a reasonable amount of legal immigration we can allow, bringing in people, especially with families, and, inviting them to the U.S., not so that it hurts our workers, but so that it benefits our economy, right? If you bring too many people in, then we don't have jobs, right? It lowers the cost of labor. And that needs to stop. And, bringing people here legally means, they come here, they vote legally. We don't have to question, when they're citizens, and permanent residents don't vote, but shouldn't vote. The point is that, this will be a process of bringing in the people who want to be in America. We know who they are, what vaccines they've had. You know what I mean? Anyway. So a lot of that's there. Also, we're going to have to renegotiate USMCA soon. And so I think Trump is doing a lot of the tariffs with Canada and Mexico because he wants to renegotiate that deal and make it a better deal for American workers. And that's where we come to a segment on the Bill Maher show that really drew that point out. And I love it. I love it because it's Amy Ungar-Sargon. I love Ungar-Sargon. She's great. She was talking about how back in the 70s, so on the Bill Maher show, right? She's explaining this tariff thing. It's like back in the 70s, when we had a more protected economy, the largest portion of the economy, the largest portion of our wealth in the United States was in the hands of the middle class, working people, right? Landsmen like me, who work for a living and, make money. You have to get up every day and sweat. And it's sweat, toil, blood, and tears to raise our families, whatever. We were the people who had the most wealth in the country. Now the top 20% have all the wealth, right? Because we've free traded away all of our jobs and prosperity and opportunity. The tariffs are an effort to bring that back, to bring back our middle class, to bring the wealth back to us. So you can imagine that's probably why people like George Soros and Warren Buffett are not happy about this. They're donating to left-wing causes and, doing, whatever they can to oppose this because they want to control the wealth. They want the power that comes from being in control. That elitist clique runs the Democrat Party, right? Which is why Trump is using the opportunity to broaden the Republican Party. Anyway, so she talked about that and she said, well, because she's a leftist, someone who thinks in left-wing terms, she thinks this is a good thing. we're going to have our workers strengthen, right? We're going to democratize our finance. And in that, she's also quoting, not quoting directly, but that's a central theme in Alexander Hamilton's writings from the founding of our country. Hamilton was very concerned that a large portion of money in the country, a large amount of the wealth, would end up in the hands of a very few, in part because he's read his history during the early 18th century. There was this period where Sir Robert Walpole was prime minister. That's actually where the name came from. It was a derisive term for him. The prime minister was actually Chancellor of the Exchequer, but they called him Cock Robin as a nickname because he lavish houses, super wealthy, bought off all the members of Parliament, corrupted. They bought seats in Parliament, did all this kind of... Anyway, it was a terrible time. A small number of people in Britain controlled a lot of the wealth and ultimately led to economic collapse because it was a huge economic downturn because these people don't manage the economy well, right? And later Adam Smith would point out, look, if you democratize finance, if you create a free market and everyone has access to opportunity, the economic resources will be directed by the invisible hand of the market. The average common people do a better job of that than a bunch of elite idiots at the top. Not perfect. We're going to make bad choices and invest in the wrong places and buy the wrong products and buy a lemon car every now and then. Okay, it's going to happen, but we'll learn our lessons and become better consumers, right? Anyway, so, Hamilton's worries are my worries. Like, when you have a bunch of money in the hands of the elites, like we did in the Gilded Age in the late 19th century, when J.P. Morgan was running around, manipulating the market and doing his speculation and what have you. Anyway, there's so many things. It was not a good time for America, right? And it did lead to a populist backlash and then the progressive movement moving away from that. So Let's get back to the middle class having the wealth. I'm all for it, and I think that's the point that we're working towards here. That's what Trump is on about. So Unger Sargon gets it. She gets it. Bill Maher doesn't get it, but she's explained it to him. But she gets it. She sees what we're doing here. We're moving the wealth back to the middle class, and the left is going nuts because when people are independent and wealthy, when you're prosperous, you don't need government programs. You don't need to kowtow to bureaucrats and political elites and vote for just the right people to keep money flowing in. You can work and take care of yourself. And then you vote for people who say, hey, I want you to take care of yourself and have your own money and make your own decisions and have a good job and your children will have a good future, like Donald Trump. So with that, I'll go to the break. When I come back, talk about, politics here in the U.S. and some things that are shifting around.
Hi, all. Ken White here. You're listening to my friend Isaac Kight on Inside Israel News. He'll be right back after these messages. Go nowhere.
Visit the Inside Israel News store on Etsy to get your swag and support the show at the same time. You can get the Promised Land shirt or the Now You're Messing with the Son of a Mensch shirt or other interesting swag, phone cases, and such at the store. Go to Etsy, look up Inside Israel News, or you can go to the website, insideisrael.news, and click on the image of the store, of the items for sale. Get your swag and show your support for Israel today. All right, time for some American politics, a little bit of the change going on here. Just a few thoughts on some of the things going on. So the Democrats caved on the spending bill. And this was kind of one of those funny things where there was talk of, threats of shutting down the government. And I had to post on X a couple of times, oh, no, whatever you do, don't shut down the government. I mean, to the extent that they ever do shut it down, people on the right were just like, yeah, shut it down. I mean, what's the problem here? And of course, they looked at the poll numbers, I think, ultimately realized that it was a complete non-starter. Nobody cares. When we find out we're spending millions of dollars on transgender mice and, Sesame Street in Iraq, people are tired of government spending. So, the whole whining about they shut down the government thing, it's not going to work this time, folks. So Chuck Schumer did the only thing he could, which is, very wisely negotiated a deal like they do in Washington. That's the way our constitutional system works. You have to make deals to pass things through Congress, right? To enact laws. And his reward for this decency, for this reasonability, for doing the usual political thing in Washington, was to become the incarnation of evil to the left, eating their own. Oh God, Chuck Schumer's evil. He's awful. They want AOC to primary him at his next election. Just, oh my Lord, people. That might actually be a good thing, though, because, she'd lose, hopefully. If she won, she'd be the gift that keeps on giving, and she'd just move to the Senate. But, if she loses, she'd have neither a seat in the House nor a seat in the Senate. So that would be a really great thing. We could get rid of her. No, I don't want AOC to go away. More on her in a minute. But still, the people on the left keep saying, we need to resist. We got to stop. You can't let Trump get away with anything. Like, these people so don't get it. Chuck Schumer is trying to save the Democrat Party right now. At this point, the American people overwhelmingly support the general direction of government cuts and spending cuts and the general direction of the administration. Trump has great numbers in approval ratings. Even left-wing polls show he has good numbers on approval ratings. It's a disaster for the Democrats. The Democrat, depending on whom you ask, they're between 27% and 30% favorability. The Democrat Party is dead for a generation, my friends. They are, and they want to resist more. They're in completely the wrong mindset. It's beautiful. Keep it up, folks, please, by all means. Now, the greatest threat to our democracy is going to be one-party rule for 20 years. Right? The Republicans and, Trump, Vance, whatever, we're going to be running the country for 20 years. What a horrible thing. Ultimately, yes, if there is no competition in the political system, that's bad, right? And I would like to see us get back to a competitive political system. If we're going to do that, the left has to get over its delusions. And they're not doing it. So it looks like they're basically conceding the 2026 elections and 2028 at the same time. Right now, the numbers are not looking good. J.D. Vance's favorability is better, head to head. They ask who do you think, do you think more favorably of Vance or AOC? Vance or Gavin Newsom? He's above all of them, right? Now, he could shoot himself in the foot between now and then. I mean, a lot can happen in 4 years. Politics is politics, but at the moment, as I've talked about in past episodes, Republicans are looking good in Congress, could even gain seats in the Senate in a class that's already overwhelmingly Republican, likely to gain some seats in the House, which will be good, that we can expand our majority and it'll be easier to pass legislation and get Trump's agenda enacted. And 2028 looks really good for the GOP as well. Looking forward to the 2030 census. I mean, the 2031 reapportionment, already it looks like Texas and Florida are going to get 4 more House seats each. California is losing 2. New York is losing 2, right? The House seats keep moving from blue states to red states. Now, that helps in Congress, but those are also electoral votes, my friends, right? That means that Texas will have more electoral votes and Florida will have more electoral votes to cast for Republicans. Those are red states. They're not bluing. So, if I were the Democrats, I'd pick a radically new strategy and quick. This is not good. Race to the bottom for the Democrats. I'm crocodile tears, my friends, crocodile tears. I'm so sad for the destruction of this Democrat Party. It's been coming for some time. When Trump won the primary in 2015, I began to say, if Trump is successful, then he'll destroy the Democrats. And in his first term, they were able to play a lot of games, Russia hoax, this nonsense. They got him out of office. In 2020, the shenanigans they pulled to win that race and do all of that, the media lost its credibility. It became blatantly obvious that they were losing power. Like they're desperately trying to hold on to power, and the Democrats become a party of elites and what have you. The American people have rebelled against that, supporting Trump now. So, times they are a-changing. The Democrats, polls out there, who represents the Democrat Party's values best? And AOC leads the poll. It's like, wow. She's way ahead of Gavin Newsom. Holy mackerel, people. I love it. I love every bit of it. I mean, by all means, say that AOC is the best representative of your party. Talk about out of touch. Whew. Holy mackerel. And we have these polls out now. They're polling among white people, right? Every white demographic is Republican now, except for college-educated women. That's still overwhelmingly Democrat. And that's you would think. I mean, you go and you get indoctrinated in college, the blue hair and piercings and tattoos and all this stuff and becoming non-binary, whatever. So yeah, I mean, they're the ones that are voting left. Every other demographic is voting right. Now, on the one hand, that, white people are leaning to the right. Yes, but that's also the largest demographic in the country. So, again, if you're the Democrats, it's not just college-educated white women you want to vote for you. You want working-class white women to vote for you and working-class white men. And the Democrats have been destroyed in both of those demographics. Among married couples, oh, God, it skews extremely right. People who are living traditional lives. Well, Gen Z is getting married. A lot of Gen Z people, a lot of the youngsters, they want a more traditional family. They want a healthier family situation than the one they grew up in as children. So, I mean, if they're already leaning rightward, if they're, already voting Republican in greater numbers than the millennials did or Gen X before them, and they're going to live more traditional lives, they're not voting Democrat anytime soon. Again, a demographic that they've completely abandoned. And so what is the left doing? What does resistance mean? How are they, trying to convince us to turn away from our evil ways and to convince us that we need to head their direction? They're burning Teslas and keying Teslas and attacking Tesla dealerships. Who's paying for this? We're going to find out. But I mean, NGOs financed by people like Soros and these elites who run the Democrat Party, people destroying Teslas. I mean, we're all about the green agenda, the Green New Deal, and stop climate change and racism and all this kind of stuff. And now, Elon's bad, and so we're going to key electric vehicles. And it's not just Teslas. People are keying other electric vehicles thinking that they're Teslas. And unfortunately, these people are dumb. Wow. Burning Teslas. That gives me pause. Makes me think. Maybe I should rethink voting for Trump because you're burning Teslas. I'm, wow. That's making me rethink my positions. Boy. All right. Well, that's the woke left. The left isn't getting any less woke. They are woker than woke still. Let's talk about the right-wing wokeness. Konstantin Krysin has been, he's a Brit and, he grew up in Russia. His family escaped from the Soviet Union. He's been talking about this right-wing wokeness, the attacks on Churchill, the shift away from morality and all this kind of thing. And it's getting ridiculous out there, my friends. One of the things he's noted is in the U.S., these attacks on Amy Coney Barrett. So we have 9 members of the Supreme Court. They're appointed there for life, right? A lot of people on the right are not too happy with Chief Justice John Roberts. he maintains the neutrality of the court, and he's not been somebody who supports the Trump agenda, for sure. He's part of the establishment. That we know that. And the 5 conservative justices, including Amy Coney Barrett, to the right of John Roberts, have generally towed the line on conservative things. But recently, she sided with, on the U.S. aid spending, she sided against Trump. She sided with the plaintiffs suing to say that Congress had appropriated that money. My friends, the Constitution says, in Article 1, Section 8, the so-called elastic clause, that Congress decides how the branches of government will use their powers. Congress has decided that there is, to limit the power of presidential impound, right? During the Nixon years, they overrode his veto. And that's the law. So in some cases where Congress has appropriated money to be spent, it has to be spent. Right. So the trick now is Congress needs to pass a bill. If finally passes a spend, they need to pass a budget and reclaim all this money. Like if it hasn't been spent, write a new law, a new budget saying, no, we're not spending it that way. So that's what we need to do. Amy Coney Barrett is a great jurist. She has the right to make a decision based on her conscience, based on her knowledge of the law. And there's that. All of the attacks on her, saying she should be impeached and removed and she should quit and all this kind of thing. Just because a justice doesn't agree with you doesn't make them a bad person, right? They don't kowtow to your agenda. This is this right-wing wokeness where, like Constantine's been talking about, if you're not 100% hard right, you're not in the club. You're a left-winger. You're not. My friends, I don't play this game of wokeness. I don't play this game of tribalism. And I'm here. I'm critical of Trump when I think he's done something I don't agree with. And I'll tell you that. Where I do agree, I'll tell you that too. But this right-wing wokeness is dangerous. I mean, we're attacking our own now. So the attacks on Amy Coney Barrett are a lot like the attacks on Chuck Schumer by the left. We've got to get past the right-wing wokeness. It's time to wake up. All right? The tribalism's over. The left has lost. We're all on side. Okay? Little legal setback is not a big deal. I'm really glad that ACB, Amy Coney Barrett, is on the Supreme Court and that she's making good decisions. She's still making better decisions than the left ever did. Some of these left-wing justices, okay? So let's not eat our own, okay? But Constantine's been talking about, he's getting attacked all the time by people claiming that, he's not right enough and this kind of thing. This is the guy who's like the face of the right wing in Britain, trying to get Britain back on track and culturally and politically and all this kind of thing. Not a guy who's a lefty. You know what I mean? He is on side, as am I. I have my doubts and I have my, things that I agree with and I don't agree with. But, we're all on the same side. We can agree to disagree. Some of you guys have written in and said, hey, like this, don't like that. Great. But if you disagree with me, by listening to me, you're going to hear a well thought out, educated opinion, whether you like it or not. And I listen to a lot of people that I don't agree with, and I have a great debate with my friend Jake Jacobs, for example, about the Ukraine thing. We have to hear opinions that we don't like. We have to be willing to have people disagree with us and debate, because maybe some of us on the right want to go this far and not any farther. Maybe some of us want to go all the way. Okay, but, we can have differences of opinion on how far to go, but we're all headed in the right direction, okay? So take a chill pill. So Elon Musk and Ted Cruz had a great interview on the verdict, and I highly recommend it. Part 1 is out. Part 2 should be out soon, possibly by the time I published this. Great interview. Talking about AI. Is there a chance that AI will take over? Skynet. They even joke about sci-fi and this kind of stuff. I love it. Ted Cruz is an all-around great guy. And we have a good time there. So good, worth a listen. Musk raised some interesting points. He thinks that development, advancements in robotics will lead to a time where goods and services are very inexpensive because they can be provided by robots, and that will increase our quality of life. Interesting opinion. Normally, I would be, say, replacing humans with robots in the labor force, I'm not a fan of. Getting truck drivers out of trucks and replacing them with self-driving trucks. I don't like this idea. On the other hand, we're desperate for labor in factories, in other jobs in our economy, and freeing up humans to take on other kinds of work that I would not necessarily oppose. But, if we achieve full employment and we still need workers. We still need work to be done. Robots can help fill in some of those gaps, and they can lower the cost of things. I'm just not sure how Elon's approaching that, and I want to hear more. All right, but the fact is, if you're going to hire labor is a high expense, right? It costs a lot of money. You have to train people. You have to invest in them. That's true. But robots are, they can do a lot of things that humans can do, granted. You could theoretically have a robotic fast food restaurant, for example. Like robots can cook patties and put cheese on them and put burgers together. And you could go to an ATM-like kiosk and it could, make you, a burger, a drink, and some fries, right? In theory, okay? But only if we don't have enough people to do those jobs, right? As long as there's a person to do those jobs, they should be doing it. Now, that's a very investment-intensive thing. Unless you're doing it on a massive scale, it's extremely expensive to create those kinds of robots and to automate that type of setup. And you still have to hire technicians to go out and repair them when they break down, because it's going to take a human to fix these things. So there's that. But if you think about it, okay, so let's say that, I buy a robot to do a job, right? Let's talk about this kiosk, fast food restaurant. So if I were starting a fast food restaurant now with people working there, I have to acquire the land or lease it, right? I have to have a property. I have to have a place to do this. Put a building on it. I have to, put all the facades in. I have to buy stoves, refrigerators, all that. Then I have to, if I'm a franchise, I'll be buying this stuff from a parent company, but it's like I have to buy food and all this. And then I have to get people in there, right, to work. And then I have to market it. Oh, we're a grand opening, Isaac's Fry Shop, whatever. That's a lot there. And then as we get running, keep costs down, just the right amount of labor, just the right amount of fries, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to overspend on things. And then if you do that, you make maybe a 2% margin if you're fortunate. And that's your profit margin, right? It's a very low margin business. So you have to have a lot of them all over the place to make big bucks, right? Now, on the other hand, let's take this kiosk example. Now, it might cost a couple $1 million to put in this robotic kiosk in the downtown part of your city, right? Wherever you live. I'm going to say, the suburbs of Dallas. I'm going to put this in McKinney or, out that way, right? Plano. Let's just say somewhere in Plano, Texas or McKinney, I'm going to put this little kiosk thing, right? It might cost several $1 million to get that installed. It could be a very expensive thing, but other than the technicians, I don't have to pay for labor, right? Now, how long does that take to pay for itself? And that's going to be the question. And that's where, this has to be done on a large scale to make it profitable. That's the point I'm making. I just don't see robots being able to do it the way that Elon wants to, because I don't see, you have to repair robots, you have to replace the robots. It's investment intensive. There are a lot of costs there. It's similar to labor, right? So if you could theoretically make these manufacture these, fast food restaurants, especially if they're modular, you just roll one into a piece of property, right? And get them up and running on a larger scale. And I could have, 500 of them in, Texas, let's just say as a whole. And that cost, $1 billion, right? How long would it take me to recover my investment and then begin to profit? Right? What's the margin going to be? Is that going to be a 20% margin business now? I mean, just looking at that, I'm not seeing it. Now, he has his ideas and he has his designs. I'd like to see cost-saving robotics, and maybe it could help. I mean, instead of having two people work the fryer, you could have a machine working part of the fryer and only one person has to work the fryer, right? Maybe, you got one person at the grill instead of two during the peak hours. Maybe you get rid of the grilling person altogether and you have one person who runs the fryer and the grill with the machine doing most of the work and that person helping to serve. Okay. I mean, that's the point. Like you can cut costs. I want to see, I like his notion. I'm hearing it. I'm thinking about it. From a business point of view, I'm not seeing how it really lowers costs that much. It's a nice vision. I mean, the idea, is something that Isaac Asimov delved into a lot in his stories, the degree to which robots could make life comfortable, safe, and secure for us. You know, the spacers in his Foundation stories and what have you. You know, they're, you know, the idea that there's people who are long lived and healthy and they have robots to do everything for them, but then that society didn't last. Elon makes the point. The next thing then in a society where we have the comfort of being, you know, having the robots do all the heavy lifting, we have to find meaning. You know, I like going to work. I like that struggle, the sweat, blood, and tears. I mean, that's what being human is. Without that, I mean, where's my meaning going to come from? If my family and my house and everything, you got robots to do all the work and that kind of thing, we lose some of ourselves in that. So, you know, there's an interesting few things to chew on. So I would listen to the interview, chew on it. What do you think? I mean, where are we headed? There are lots of people saying they think humans are going to be replaced by robots. There's going to be terrible poverty. You know, people on the left, oh, we're going to have terrible poverty because people, you know, we're going to have to implement universal income because people are going to be too poor and this kind of thing. And I'm like, but let's look at Elon's utopian vision. Right? If food is really cheap because robots are doing the work instead of humans, and a lot of the services that we need in our daily lives are provided by robots very inexpensively, I mean, there are benefits there too. I tend to think of this, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think there are going to be places in the economy where robotics will be very helpful and will reduce costs and increase productivity. I just don't see this utopian vision. But, you know, I keep an open mind. So with that, you've heard me ramble on about all the things going on in the world, the good, the bad, and the ugly for all this time. So it's time for a joke and to call it an episode. How about that? All right. So there's a rabbi. He's in shul at the synagogue. It's Shabbat morning. He's giving his talk. And as he's talking about the 10 Commandments, this week's portion, we read the 10 Commandments, and he sees Ari in the back. And he's, Ari, he hasn't seen him since bar mitzvah. Since he was a young kid, we have this thing, kids, they never come back to shul. We never see them again after bar mitzvah, right? Finally sees him. He's a grown man now and is kind of thinking, oh, I've got to go talk to him. So as soon as the service is over, he runs to the back. Ari shakes his hand. Hey, it's so good to see you back. Are you coming back in now? And this kind of thing. And Ari says, well, I'm sorry to tell you, Rav, I came with very poor intentions. Oh, what's going on? He says, well, I lost my hat, a really good hat. And I knew that, that Joe Fleischman, he's got the same hat. And he comes to this shul. So I was planning to come here and steal the hat. I figured nobody would notice, right? And the rabbi says, oh, that's terrible. Why would you do this? And he says, well, don't worry, Rabbi. I've changed my mind. I'm not going to do it. I listened to what you were saying, and I'm not going to steal his hat. The rabbi says, oh, that's so great. You were listening to my talk, the 10 Commandments. He says, you will not steal. You're taking it in. I'm so glad I'm having an impact on people, and I'm helping others see the light of morality and following God's laws. And Ari says, oh no, Rav. You see, it's just that when you said you will not commit adultery, I realized where I left my hat. And with that, it's been another wonderful episode. This is the last episode of Inside Israel News. It's been great. Now it's going to become Mensch-Kight geopolitics, and we're going to keep going. And it's going to be interesting. We'll keep having fun. Appreciate you listening, and I will be back with more fun and a new format and a new show. And I'm even getting my shows professionally produced. I'm tired of editing. It's so labor intensive. So I'm going to hand that off to someone else. So maybe the quality will improve a little too. We'll see. So I will say, as always, goodbye, Lahitrot.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers, life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. אין שום, אין מקום, אין אותי מיום ליום. כולם ילדים טובים, אחד אחד. Bring them back home.